Great. Thank you for joining us today on our Career Conversations podcast. We're really excited to welcome Kirk Wangensteen here for our discussion today. Kirk won one of our Beckman Young Investigator Awards as an MD PhD, which I think we're all going to be really interested to hear about what that career path looked like and how you got there. But just to start off, could you talk a little bit about, when you really felt like you got interested in science and what that looked like for you? Maybe it was elementary school or middle school.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, I became interested in science and medicine early on. I was inspired, I think, by hearing some stories about my great-grandfather, Owen Wangensteen, who was a physician scientist, and he was a surgeon, and he was the chair of surgery at University of Minnesota for almost 40 years, I believe, and he was involved in a lot of early research in like surgical science. Like he was one of the original inventors of gastric suction. Um, so they used to call it the Wangenstein tube. And I guess hearing about that growing up, I thought it was just fascinating to have a career where you're doing you're helping patients, you're doing research, you do something impactful where you can make a discovery. And I think that inspired me. My parents, I mean, I grew up mostly with my mother. She was an academic person, but in literature. So I think I grew up exposed to kind of the college life, and I think I she instilled in me a lot of the interest in learning and curiosity, which I think is so important in a career in science. And so I also give her a lot of credit for inspiring me to uh, become a physician scientist.
So was it sort of high school lab? When did you start thinking, I'm going to follow great grandpa?
Yeah. Uh, my first experience doing any kind of research was actually in high school. We had like a an elective class on research, and there's one of my high school teachers, Dr. Long or Mr. Longenecker, um, had us kind of learn about the scientific process, how to come up with a research question, and with very limited resources, try to answer a research question. And I worked on something with plant biology and trying to culture plants in a really rudimentary culture box in my high school. But you know, that was my first experience with doing some research, and I knew already going into college that I would pursue a STEM career and probably medicine. And so I went on to college at Northwestern University, and I majored in biology with an evolutionary biology um, kind of focus. I worked in a research lab for a couple of years in college, and I did a summer research internship at University of Pennsylvania. And those experiences in a lab and working with graduate students and postdocs kind of solidified my interest. Um, and and so I also did some volunteering in the Evanston Hospital when I was at Northwestern University. And so I got some experiences with the medical field and seeing patients. And so I thought, there's this MD, PhD career pathway. And so when I applied for medical school, I applied to MD, PhD programs. And I ended up choosing to go to University of Minnesota, where my great grandfather was a surgeon for so many years. And so there, MD PhD programs, they have had a kind of a traditional pathway at the time where you do 2 years of medical school, the first 2 years of medical school, then the entire PhD, and then you go back to do the kind of the clinical part of the medical training, working in the hospital. It's
How
a
long, how
long
long does
pathway.
that take?
For me, it took the PhD part took 5 years,
Oh,
um,
wow.
and the clinical part was a standard 4 years, so it's 9 years. Um, it's a very long pathway to become a physician scientist,
Mhm.
but you have to like it the whole time. I mean, it's a career of lifelong
Yeah.
learning, and um, and so
Can, yeah.
yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit, like how is that structured? Do you go in with a PhD advisor when you're applying at medical school? And how do you kind of connect all of those dots in one place? How did you think about that?
In my program, it was
Hmm.
we had to do rotations, but they were kind of abbreviated rotations before we chose our PhD advisor.
Hmm.
Um, it was more like hanging around in the lab when we had some free time just to see if it's a good fit or not.
Hmm.
And I chose a lab. The director was Steve Ecker, who was also one of kind of the people that inspired me in during my career, and uh, and I became interested in his lab because he was studying genomics. So I started med school in 2000, and it was around the time when the Human Genome Project was um, becoming complete. And we had all of this genetic information and started to get a good sense that there were about 20,000 genes in the genome. But what was clear was that we didn't know what these genes were all doing. And we still don't know that, obviously, but um, that's really when like the field of genomics started to become really important and popular with scientists. So his lab was trying to assign functions to these genes. Um, and his model was with zebrafish, and he would use these uh, gene targeting um, uh, molecules, oligonucleotides called morpholinos, and they would block gene function and then um, uh, with
What happened?
different projects in the lab, they were trying to see what would happen to these little fish when you block a random gene. It wasn't totally random, but I found that interesting. The concept of trying to assign functions to genes, and I didn't end up working so much with zebrafish. I worked with a mouse model. This a model that um, undergoes liver regeneration, um, and
Hmm.
and you could um, uh, what I studied for my PhD is whether we could um, block a gene during this liver regeneration process and see and learn something about how that gene works. And so with this model, um, I studied how to link the liver regeneration process with either expressing a gene or knocking a gene out simultaneously,
Right.
and learning how it works. And that's a model that I ended up using in my postdoc, and to this day in my lab that I have now with a team of 7 people. we continue to use this FAH uh, liver regeneration model to study how genes work. And that's actually what the Beckman
Yeah.
um, Foundation project helped to fund was a an interesting genetic screen that we did. Um, and I can talk about that too. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we'd love to hear about it. I do kind of want to think a little bit though, like you said, you had to love it the whole time, because it's a really long process to get the MD PhD. Like, how did you keep that commitment going? And it sounds like, I mean, you must have really been in that research team, and you're still continuing that research even after. So, but in terms of just the commitment to the program, like you made it to the end.
yeah.
Was there something,
And
I don't know, like for those who are thinking about starting it, like what should they expect in
it's a
terms of
long
continuing?
slog, that's for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of commitment. Um, but uh, yeah, I think it it requires a lot of curiosity, um, fortitude. Um, it's certainly um, like with many careers, has its ups and downs. In research, there are ups and downs all the time. Um, they're different kind of uh, things that uh, are that make um, people's career have a lot of satisfaction in different fields. So, like in medicine, um, I get a lot of satisfaction from um, uh, helping a patient understand their problem and helping them to feel better if they have a problem with abdominal pain or a problem with a colon polyp or colon cancer. I can talk a little bit more about what I do clinically, but um, those rewards tend to be with day-to-day interaction with patients and follow up with patients. Um, and there are, of course, stresses with having to see a lot of people or having to navigate difficult situations. Um, in research, I find that there are different kind of things are um, uh, that make me happy and that cause stress. So um, it seems like the wins and losses are on a much longer scale. Like you build a project for a long time and then can develop some setback or some unexpected finding, and then you have to go back and figure out what happened. Um, experiences with trying to publish papers or get a grant can be either extremely exciting if you get a paper or grant and everything works well, or it can be disappointing too. But mostly, I think having a lot of curiosity for the science and how things work and trying to figure it out, and then eventually finding something new. That's what's excites me a lot in research and I think in this career they're just so it's there's so many opportunities for that from the time I've been a trainee to later like a postdoc and now as a faculty member I can um, continue to learn and experience
Mhm.
those things and learn how to navigate through difficult problems or try to understand something that's really novel or unexplored. So it's a
How
it's a
how
very
do you,
very
yeah.
long career, but I think you know it um, there's it's it's a lot of training uh, and um, and learning along the way, and you pick up more and more responsibilities. I just see it as like like a career evolution rather than um, you do the training and you're done and now you're fully qualified to do everything.
Yeah.
I still learn from what I'm doing every day.
How did you develop like a mentorship team? It sounds like you need to have people in both camps, right? You need mentors in the clinic and mentors in the research lab, and are you able to continue those relationships as you've advanced through your career?
Absolutely. I think for the PhD part, it's usually the for an ND PhD program, it's kind of um, very similar to programs that are for PhD only. Um, you have your um, primary mentor and then usually a PhD committee who you
Mhm.
meet with regularly, and then ultimately you you defend your PhD thesis with a committee. Um, on the um, more clinical side, um, you can have a lot of kind of mentors and teachers along the way. You usually work shoulder to shoulder with some um, attending doctor or supervising doctor, especially early on. Um, and then at different stages, you get more and more independence um, and start to be able to order things for patients on your own and see patients on your own. So that part I think is also fairly well established how to take on those responsibilities over time. Um, yeah,
And
so
during the program, like, are you continuing your clinical work while you're doing your PhD, or is it really like 2 years, then the break, then PhD, and then back? It seems like a long time to sort of put that on pause.
yeah, that's a good question. For me, it was mostly compartmentalized, so
Hmm.
um, mostly focused on uh, clinical education for those first 2 years with a few rotations in a lab, then mostly focused on research, just like with any graduate student, um, and then back to mostly working in the hospital in the clinical situation. But in my program, and I think it's pretty common nowadays, I have an MD PhD student in my lab who's doing something similar. Um, you know, I was kind of agnostic to what kind of clinical specialty I would do actually until I was in my PhD portion, and I started working on the liver and learning about the liver due to this cool animal model where I can study liver genetics, and so I sought out a hepatologist who
Right.
was seeing patients with liver disease, and I started on a weekly basis going to his clinic and seeing patients with liver disease, and so that got me really interested in gastroenterology as a specialty, where I could um, learn about GI organs and treat patients with liver disease and other GI problems. So. Um, in my case, it was kind of my research led to my uh,
Yeah.
clinical career
I was just
choices.
gonna ask, what's the crosstalk? So you took your research and that helped drive your clinical specialty.
Yeah,
Do you see does it go the other way too? Like what you're seeing in clinic drive research questions that you're working on now?
absolutely. I mean, that's the ideal, right? I mean, that's what I was um, hoping to do when I got into an MD, PhD program and a physician scientist career was to mix what I'm doing in the lab and maybe make some discoveries that I could bring to the clinic or make some observations in clinic and then bring it back to the lab and study those things. Um, I found that with time that's actually a lot harder to do than it sounds, but I've still managed to do that. I've certainly done things where I'll give an example. So uh, as a GI fellow, I had uh, one of my mentors was Anil Rustagi. He was a physician scientist, but he was focused clinically on some genetic problems with cancer risk. So he was seeing patients that have Lynch syndrome and polyposis syndromes. These um, changes in specific genes that leads to an increased risk of GI cancers, colon cancer in particular. And I enjoyed working with him in clinic, and he invited me to join him in that clinic, so that once I became more independent, a junior faculty member, um, I I began to see those patients on my own and make recommendations to those patients on how to mitigate their cancer risks. Um, from that experience, I developed a research question where I asked, uh, what is the rate of detecting these kind of inherited cancer risks in patients that have liver cancer? And that was a question that hadn't really been studied well. And so I started a project where I started doing genetic testing in patients with liver cancer. And and found that in more than 11% of patients, they have one of these inherited gene variants that increases cancer risks, which means, that has important implications for their family members who may be at risk and for treatment. And that led eventually to like a big grant from the NIH that still funds a lot of my lab to this day. So yes, I mean
Yeah.
I'm I'm living the dream that I
You set
was
forth on.
really set forward to do. Like it's something that I really wanted to do was study um, to become a physician scientist and help patients both, with my research and in the clinic.
How would you say your workload balance is between the two sides, relative to your colleagues who are just MDs or relative to those you work with on the research side? How are you crossing both worlds, and is it 50/50?
That's a good question and one that comes up a lot. Um, Usually, interestingly, you have to focus most of your time if you're going to be successful as a independent um, a lab director. You have to focus most of your time on research, and that's been the case for me. So I spend about 80% of my time focused on research, and my day-to-day life mostly focuses on meeting with my lab um, personnel, my trainees,
Okay.
um, and writing papers and grants and being involved in academic activities like that. And then 20% of the time, which is not one day per week, it's like kind of scattered. It's not like a very um, regular schedule for my clinical time, but overall, my time in clinic is about 20% the of my time, and that's split between seeing patients in an outpatient clinic and doing consultations in the hospital.
Okay.
So my day-to-day life is really varied. I kind of like that. I mean, um, I I can be writing a paper, and then I switch over to checking on my patients' labs and giving them a phone call with follow-up, and then I'll go back to writing the paper. Um, uh, I think it makes, my day really varied and interesting.
Yeah. So we're running up on our time here together today. I just want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything you would say, some undergraduates who are interested in MD or trying to make the decision, MD only, PhD only, or the blend like you've done? Like what kind of advice would you provide?
I would say I love my career, and if you think that you would like to see patients and do research, to definitely pursue the MD PhD program. I don't think that it's necessarily more competitive to get into than an MD only program, which is already very competitive. Um, but they will want to know about your interest in research, especially. So for a lot of people, a lot of undergrads interested in that career, nowadays they'll take a gap year and spend some time in a research lab, and it's usually good to have um, some publications before applying. Um, but I overall the main uh, fit that I think would be important to consider is like, are you a curious person, and are you someone who likes to acquire, like Arnold Beckman says in his rules for success? Do you want to acquire new knowledge and always ask why? That was one of his rules. And if you do, and you're persistent at it, and can have like a lot of fortitude, and can get through some uh, uh, complicated situations, and then it's a great and rewarding career ultimately. So um, and I'd be happy to discuss my experience more with you or with other interested trainees.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time together and hearing about your career. Congratulations on
Thank
getting everything put together. It sounds amazing.
thank you, Anne, so much for this opportunity to talk about this career pathway.
Great. Thanks, Kirk.